start answering them.
Yeah. Let's start with some questions. So let's scroll down. So, ever have two group of guys watch? Oh, yeah, this was interesting about Dinah. Have you ever seen Dinah? You know what? I realised I've never seen it.
No, I've seen it, and it was actually one of the films that I saw before we started making Dead Cat. Because I mean, obviously, there's so it's a Barry Levinson film. It's a wonderful film, and it's an '80s classic. And Mickey Rourke actually is really good in it. Before he turned into a different kind of Mickey Rourke, he was like, it was at that age where he was incredibly good looking and incredibly charming and all of that type of stuff. So yeah, no, Dinah was definitely a movie that I saw, and yeah, I mean, it's a great movie. So I mean, I'd seen it before, but it definitely had an impact on us, on me before we started shooting Dead Cat. But you should watch it, Sam. You'd really like it as well.
I've just been asked if I grew all the hair for the movie.
You did. That's absolutely true.
I sort of did. I mean, it was weird. I guess we'll talk about that more when we're watching it. But it was like I wasn't going to be. I mean, I wasn't meant to be playing Sam. I just stopped cutting my hair and shaving, like once we got to first draft.
Yes.
Because it was just a really intense time, and it I think looking like I just escaped from the jungle sort of helped us a bit, because it was like I don't know, that part of the madness of making a film, I guess.
But also, I think as part of the character of Sam, it was important that he stood out from the other guys. And yes, okay, you stood out anyway, but just that hair, it was far easier to cut your lines because your hair spoke volumes for your character, which was wonderful. I think and I mean that seriously, because the more interesting we made you to look at, the less you had to say, and the more endearing you became. So it was kind of this wonderful that so many people comment on your hair in the film, and people remember your character partly because of it.
Yeah, it's a weird thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
We've been asked, had we actually tried speed dating before?
Well, we did raise money, didn't we?
Yeah, because we ran a speed dating night. Amy did, and Ale, like, they set up a speed dating night as a fundraiser for the film. And I guess we sort of got some stuff from that, didn't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was some. I mean, a lot of it was friends and friends of friends, but just watching the interaction between people and the awkwardness between people, and watching how people decided to present themselves in a very short space of time. I mean, it's a goldmine really for a comedy film, I think, because it's just wonderful interactions between people.
And they're almost like sketches because it's so sort of short. It's sort of like the actual, like it being 3 minutes long, like the idea of it. But I guess you've never really had a big dating period. Like
I didn't know we were going full personal on our.
Oh yeah, no, it's true.
But no, Sam is right. I have been in relationships which help the movie in a different way. But I only very early in my 20s did I have a dating period, and I have experienced a couple of odd dates. But nothing quite comes close to speed dating. I think I was very fortunate to miss that.
And this is funny because I guess we'll point out some of the bits in the film that are improvised. But we've got a question here about how much were the coffee shop scenes improvised, and they're actually quite those scenes were quite heavily scripted.
Very, very, very scripted. They had to be, really, and they were heavily rehearsed as well. And I think probably what we should say is that they were heavily scripted, but there was room for the characters to go off piste in between. And we rehearsed the scene so many times that the guys put in a line here, a line there, and it became part of the script as we moved towards shooting. So I guess the best way to answer it is that it was very heavily scripted. Every character, every actor had like full autonomy over their character, so they were allowed to kind of expand their lines where they saw fit, and then we had to cut it all together in the edit.
Okay, we have now 40 seconds from pressing play.
Okay, all right.
So what is the next question we're gonna, or are we gonna, I don't know, was there a costume budget? Well, that's an easy one. No, there was no costume budget. Literally everything that's being worn in the film belongs to someone.
Zero costume budget.
Okay, here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so now we're pressing play.
Okay.
Right. So, starting with the cat.
We actually, I suppose one of the first things to say is that we actually shot an alternate beginning, actually, to the film. In the original script, we'd always intended to open the film on a dead cat, but when we shot and we put the film together, we actually thought about doing another opening sequence which introduced Michael in a slightly different way, which we subsequently dropped, actually. So yeah, just a little interesting tidbit there.
Yeah, but it was also it was a funny thing, wasn't it? Because it was the cat was like the first thing we started with, really. Like that idea of a cat, like as a romantic comedy, there being the reason why Michael's damaged is that he's got this cat that's died, and you don't quite know why it's died, and the reaction to it's a bit odd. And obviously, here's the three of them
in the cab.
Yeah, I find it like it's such a shame that you don't quite see Tom's face is actually on that magazine.
Yeah, quite a bit of production design went into that.
Yeah.
Actually, I just saw a tweet come through about the dead cat. The dead cat itself was real. It was a cat that was quite expensive, actually. Most expensive prop on the film.
Yeah, it was a taxidermied cat filled with sand.
It's very weird to hold, everyone. It was very weird to hold, let me tell you.
Yeah, it was. We paid slightly more to have a soft cat so that it would sort of flop about. I think. Oh, and this is actually CG because we didn't have Tom's face on a big poster, so
we hadn't done Sleepy Hollow yet.
Yeah. Artist speed dating is something that used to happen in London, but and I thought it was really funny if Sam was just staring at the same thing, but the unfortunate truth of it is that it's just a bit odd.
I quite like, actually, that it's odd. In this kind of trio of characters, I think it's the odder Sam is, the better. And for anyone that is wondering, there is a gap between Sam's chest hair and his facial hair.
Yeah, I shave it every morning.
It's very small, but it does exist.
Oh, this is such an awful thing. I don't like Sam's line here.
It was actually the tricky thing, directing wise. I always wanted to shoot all of these little scenes in a very different way. So I had to try and figure out ways in which I can put the cameras in different positions in the location so that each conversation between the pair felt like something new and fresh every time. I love Tom in this scene, actually.
I mean, he's so beautiful in this scene, isn't it?
It's not only is he beautiful to look like, he looks like a cappuccino, but he's just, that's how charming and wonderful and slightly sad he is when you meet him. You know, he is all of those wonderful things, and I love the speed dating scene for that.
This joke that Seb's saying is actually a joke that I used to say to Seb when we were in a play together, like 100 years ago. I don't think he even remembered it when we did it in the script. Oh, the wonderful Pip Swallow.
Pip Swallow is one of the most wonderful comedic actresses. Seriously, I worked on her with a play in a play in Edinburgh, and she was so good. And we had to use her in Dead Cat. She's disgustingly underused, actually, in our film.
And here's Emmons, currently performing in Simple 8 show.
Actually, another tip is we shot quite a lot of speed dating scenes for this. So what you see in the final film is really about half of what we shot. There was a lot of scenes with all three characters that we ended up taking away for a variety of reasons. Sometimes those scenes were a little bit too long. Sometimes they just weren't quite funny enough. Sometimes, probably in the case of Sam, they were just a little bit too weird. So it was quite an interesting process choosing which speed dating scenes we kept.
One of the things I like about this scene is Ems's character is sort of like, if Michael were in a better place, he'd be able to have a perfectly lovely time. Like the two of them, like she seems up for something, she's interesting, she's funny, but Michael's still not really able to connect with her.
She's the girl he should go with.
Yeah. Well, if he was in a better place, if he was like, and there's Matt. Matt's in all our films. This is the only film he doesn't eat in.
Actually, Matt had more, and Matt is one of those characters that had another scene that we took out. And actually, we had a scene with my sister and a baby. So she brought her baby to a speed dating event, which we thought was quite funny, but it just ended up having to be cut because we needed to cut to the chase a little bit more with our three central characters.
That's actually what I draw like.
Yeah, that's a Sam Byrne original. Right there. I love this guy waiting in the background.
Yeah, Andy. I'd done an advert with him. And then there it is. I love, this is where we start to hear the score come through. Like for the first time, I think.
It is for the first time, yeah. And it's obviously for the first time because it's the first time we meet Kristen. I saw one of the questions actually on Twitter ask whether we'd written the screenplay for these actors. The truth is, yes, for the four guys, for Sam, for Seb, for Tom, and for Johnny, though we're all a close friend group and we wrote the script specifically for them. However, though I briefly knew Sophia, who plays Kristen, she wasn't someone we wrote for. We auditioned for Kristen, and Sophia was just, I mean, she was so wonderful. She makes the film in a lot of ways for me, and we can talk about that as we go on. But she just embodied everything we wanted Kristen to be, and we didn't want Kristen to be. We wanted her to be strong and independent, and someone who challenged Michael on a lot of things, and she does it so beautifully. And we wanted this pairing between Michael and Kristen to really stand up against each other. So
and she really does, because I think that was the tricky thing, finding someone, because Seb's such a strong presence. It's very, I think it could be very difficult. Like it was difficult finding someone who could sort of match him. And I remember that, like when because we were at drama school together, Sophia, Seb, myself, and they did a play together, and I remember just thinking they were just incredible on stage together. And they really sort of brought it along into this.
They've got, there's a wonderful chemistry about them, actually.
Yeah.
That's very kind of underneath their friendship. And this is a wonderful, hopefully it's a nice, that meet cute between your two romantic comedy protagonists is always a tricky thing to kind of overcome. And hopefully we wanted to make it essentially as awkward as possible. Because it's what brings Michael out of his shell ultimately. And this was a little ever so slightly pretentious moment that we put in about this shot here, where he's listening to the music and just looking at all these people in London who are kind of desperate to find their soulmates or their partners or their relationships. And it's a very small moment, but it's a moment that I really love. And
it's a moment, because we talked quite a lot about it in the mix, didn't we? Especially that when he pulls out the microphones, the music doesn't stop. It continues.
Because essentially that's what our film is about. It's you know, these people are lost and they're trying to find a companion, and our film is very much about that. And I think that even just that kind of 10 seconds hopefully just starts to give an audience an inkling about what our film's about.
Michael's house in the film is actually my parents' old house, which we destroyed. Like,
we can talk a little bit more about that later, I think, with the but I think I saw someone on Twitter ask about the relationship between Michael and his dad, and it was always a focus of our script. Actually, we had Kristen and her mother was a lot bigger than you actually see in the film. So we had Michael and his father, Kristen and her mother, and obviously Michael and Kristen together. Unfortunately, all three of those it was too much really for the film to hold together with the friends. So we had to drastically kind of cut down Kristen and her mother. But Michael, the relationship he has with his father, it being awkward, it was something that Sam and I talked a lot about, and is very much based on it kind of started with a relationship that I had with my dad, and then it was kind of enhanced definitely for this film.
I love this photo, and I love that she's sort of torn up the flat looking for it. Sorry, we're just falling into a thing of just going, oh, I've forgotten all these things I like.
It was tricky to intercut these moments because you've got the dad, you've got Michael, and you've got Kristen all blended together. And to finish the evening off, we always really loved him sleeping on his doorstep. I think it kind of listening to Kristen's music.
Sargon and Bobby.
Bobby here actually had another deleted scene where we actually saw a lot more his relationship sleeping with Kristen's mother. But unfortunately, Bobby just had to be cut down, which is tragic because he is one of the funniest men I've met. He's so wonderful.
The thong that Sam wears in the wedding scene later is actually Bobby's thong.
I just saw a question about the photo that we just saw, and it was it's a photo actually that we just found online. It's not of anyone, but they do kind of look remarkably similar to Seb and Sophia, so we're quite lucky.
I think our production designer, or I think maybe our production designer took it, like Roshni. I think her boyfriend found it. And then here's the cafe. Marco actually used to own, like Johnny, who plays Marco, used to own this cafe, which has now been demolished. So it was in Stratford.
The cafe scenes were always a big focus of the screenplay because there's 3 key cafe scenes in the film, and a lot of the structure of what we were writing centered around these 3 cafe scenes. Obviously, it's where you see the friendship of these 4 guys come together. I know somebody asked whether the relationship between us as friends is like the relationship that you see in the film. I'm almost ashamed to say yes. It is very close to that. The banter and the of course it's heightened, but I guess the best way to say it is that each of these characters is a slightly exaggerated version of the real characters. And I think that's probably, hopefully that adds to the charm of the film. You know, it was very important for me directing the film that the audience believe that these guys were real friends, because ordinarily these 4 guys wouldn't really know each other in real life. They're such different people, but as long as you believe that they all come together, which is what's happened in our real life, we've all kind of come together from different backgrounds, and I found the dynamics between all 4 of these so wonderful. I just felt like I had to put them on screen as realistically as possible.
I think it was also good because we had to spend these cafe days were long days. They started very early and they finished very late. Like we were probably doing like 12-hour days in this cafe on a Sunday.
Yeah, they were very long days. So, and the biggest thing technically was, you guys, I'm sure know about it, but crossing the line and making sure that the eye lines were correct. So, it being my first feature, it was quite a tricky headache to try and make sure that everyone was looking at the right person at the right time during the conversation. It was an interesting day.
We've been asked how long did it take each to complete each aspect of the film: rehearsal, filming, and editing.
So it took us 31 days to shoot the film. We rehearsed for 2 weeks before that, but even before we rehearsed, whilst we were writing the screenplay, we were showing it to Tom, to Seb, and to Johnny as well for their kind of feedback. So it was very much an organic development as we were working through. The edit probably took the best part of a year, but that's because we were working in an office in London in evenings, and it was the office of the editor, Steve Beard. He was working there, and we could only work on certain nights a week, so it just kind of took a very long time. But it took a very long time to complete. It was the sound actually that took even more time.
Probably took another year.
Yeah.
Like sound disposition, who eventually finished the sound. It took us a while to meet them. There was a lot of problems with the sound, and actually probably about, I think they worked out 70% of this film that we're watching is actually dubbed, like re-recorded sound. It was what they did. They opened up the timeline again recently to take a look at it, and it was just huge, the amount of work that they did.
I just want to, sorry Sam, to cut in. I just want to point out in this scene here, this is Sargon, who plays Peter, who is a super talented and wonderful actor. And it was a big point actually with Sam and I when we were writing the script that we wanted Kristen's partner to be a very viable option for Kristen in her life. It's very easy to make someone like Peter a villain as part of a romantic film, but I hope that Sargon brings this kind of warmth to this character that makes him likable. And I think there's definitely been people that have come up to us and just said, why doesn't Kristen just go with Peter? You know, he's a much better fit for her. And that's a very interesting.
I mean, it's a real testament to his performance, because I think for lots of people, they'd be really happy with Peter.
Exactly. Yeah. This is exactly. Johnny is very much like this, I would say, and he's. He's just one of the most amazing human beings you'll probably ever meet.
He's incredible. It's like a force of nature. He's the funniest guy.
The budget of the film, I've just seen a tweet come through about the budget of the film. So we basically, Sam and I decided in January, whatever year it was, that we were going to make this film in August. We said, right, we're going to shoot this film in August, and we'll raise as much money as we can from now until then to make the film. Whatever we have, that's what we'll make it with. And we ended up raising £24,000 to make this film. A camera was borrowed. We borrowed this camera and paid it off later. And the budget kind of rose with the sound after that. I'd say probably the total budget is probably closer to about 34,000, somewhere like that. 32,000. So we shot the movie for 24 and we finished it for 32,000. So look, think of it as £1,000 a shooting day. That's what it cost us to make.
Yeah, which in film terms, like Dead Cat classes as a no budget film. So it means as soon as you've opened the doors, you've basically spent all your money, because 32,000 it sounds a lot, and it is a lot in terms of your life. Like you could put a deposit on a house, or you could not work for a year with 32,000. But in film terms, it's quite small. Almost just feeding people for a month who you need to make a film can easily be 32,000. Moving people around London, it's very expensive.
This scene that we're watching now is very much the heart of the idea that we originally came up with the film, which is what happens if a love that you have in your life comes back. What if the one that got away came back into your life? And it's we felt it was something that we felt was a very universal theme, and something that we thought was a wonderful starting point for a romantic film. Mm-hmm.
That scene was improvised.
This moment here was improvised.
Yeah. So Tom improvised that line and I improvised the response. It was quite actually intimidating working with Tom, because Tom's really good. And I obviously don't have the camera experience that Tom's got. But he's a very giving actor.
I'll tell you the one thing. I know there's a lot of people that love Tom who are watching this. He's obviously incredibly charming and incredibly funny, and he's such a lovely guy. I mean, I would love to sit here and say that he's not any of those things, but unfortunately he is. He's as wonderful as you'd hope him to be.
Yeah.
But when you work with him, he is super bright and super on it. And from a professional point of view, you're watching him, and it's actually a joy to watch him navigate his way through a scene and watch him make the choices that he makes, because he will give you something that you wouldn't expect, and something that's almost always better than what you had originally conceived.
Yeah.
He thinks very clearly about what his character is doing in the scene and what part he's playing in that scene. And it was the first time that I properly worked with Tom, and it was a real treat. I hope he doesn't hear me saying any of this, but it is quite a.
There's no way he's going to listen to this.
Yeah, so it was quite wonderful to work with him.
And this is all Shoreditch. So the graffiti, the streets, all the motorbikes. It's very East London.
And those of you who asked whether we paid for permission to shoot in London, you probably won't be surprised to know that that's a big no. Everything, literally every location we shot at, exterior in London, was stolen, for lack of a better word. So, I mean, you can basically shoot in London. You'll notice that this shot is not on a tripod. So basically,
same with nearly all the shots in the film.
Yeah, if you shoot on sticks, then you probably have to pay, or you'll get asked to move on. If you shoot handheld, then and you're quick about it, more often than not, you can get away with it. And we
that guy who walked past doesn't know he's in a feature film. He's just a guy walking past on the street.
Please don't let anyone don't let him know, because he'll come to us and ask for money. A lot of people have mentioned that I just saw a tweet about it being a bit Sex in the City with guys. That's something that a lot of people have seemed to respond to. It's true. It's not something actually that Sam and I thought of, bizarrely, before we started making this film. But obviously, as the years have gone by that we've made it, then it is a comparison that a lot of people make.
And I mean, I really love that moment with Sophia, where she sort of takes control of Seb and lets him walk along with her.
This was a sequence we shot actually in pickups. You probably won't be able to know, but
Seb's hair is a lot longer here.
He was making a movie in Germany, and he kind of came back, and he had this long hair, so we had to shoot everything from distance so that you wouldn't notice. But yeah, it's shot probably a year after we did the original photography. This little sequence here.
I think it was exactly a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a year. Yeah, and you can see even Kristen actually looks different. But and here they are back in the original shooting day.
Yeah. Kristen was also actually pushing a different bike.
Yeah, movie magic.
I think this was actually one of the first scenes we wrote.
Mm.
Like these lines, I lie all the time.
And the thing is, I think we wanted to cast Seb in this part. I genuinely like my
Yeah.
original thinkings for this was that basically I love Seb. I think he not only is he like this wonderful actor and he's intelligent and funny and all of those things, but he's just someone that I love as a human being. And I think that he can be quite a difficult personality if you don't know him very well. And my thinking was that if we could get an audience to love him the way both Sam and I love him, then we'll have quite an interesting romantic comedy here, because he isn't your classic romantic protagonist, I think. You know, he's quite he can be quite downbeat about certain things, and I thought if we can take someone who's a bit downbeat and kind of invert that into something that's very positive, then hopefully we'll have something a bit different for a romantic comedy.
The little girl, Tabitha, her parents are me and Steph's old head teacher, because me and Steph have known each other since we were 12, and at secondary school, this guy, Mr. Sullivan?
Tim Sullivan, yeah.
Tim Sullivan, yeah. He taught Steph media studies, and then
She
he became
was
the head
so
teacher.
adorable. This
really
little girl
sweet.
was so adorable, and she got on so well with Sargon. And I mean, I saw someone mention it in the Twitter sphere just now, that the relationship Peter has with his daughter is such an endearing quality for Peter, and hopefully something that an audience will watch and it'll resonate. You know, it's a plus point very much that he's a great dad.
And we're coming up to another improvised bit, the Seb saying it fluctuates. And that always cracks me up. I love that shot. And then Seb being pushed outside of it.
Mm.
And then cut off. I mean, it's...
Hopefully this scene really establishes these three kind of key characters in our film's dynamic, and and hopefully you empathize slightly with Michael here.
Seb actually did quite a few different versions of that line, didn't he?
Yeah,
I think there was different options. Being paid with beer. This is my friend Paul's flat, which is Kristen's flat in the film. He's still got a broken light fitting, which from when we shot in his house.
This scene actually was shot on the pickups that we did a year afterwards. We felt like we needed to explain, we needed to further develop the relationship between mother and daughter, because it's quite tricky to have a mother and daughter separated, and we wanted the audience to understand that Kristen was a good mother, even if she wasn't 100% successful at the relationship with her ex. So it was important for us. So we reshot that moment there where she talks to her daughter on the phone. Sophia was very keen actually to make sure that came across, because it's a big thing for for any parent, I'm sure, to be seen to be a good parent. This was a decision we made quite early on to do this all in one shot, which made it quite tricky to. I think we did about 7 or 8 takes, but here obviously we had to establish Tim or Tom's alternate personality as this kind of TV star. Ironic how now he is that wonderful TV star.
Yeah.
And this is Daniela, who's a wonderful actress that I met in Edinburgh doing a play, and I just thought she was so striking and so interesting, and she came and was very gracious to do this part for us. Everyone loves Johnny's analysis of a gallery here.
Because this is actually how Johnny goes around to gallery. A lot of the photos are friends of ours. And Steph gets his cameo in one of these. There he is.
I can only apologise for that photograph.
Yeah.
You know what? I just saw someone tweet about the characters not being one-dimensional and everyone having problems. And that was one of the first things Sam and I talked about, is that the relationships in this film, they don't all particularly work out. Like, they're not your conventional relationships. But we felt that in modern day, kind of contemporary London, a lot of relationships that we were noticing shouldn't work, but they do. And my family is kind of littered with relationships that shouldn't work, but they do. And we wanted that to kind of come across in the film, that unorthodox relationships are great, and these things should be embraced rather than kind of pushed to the sidelines.
I think, was the whole of the end of that scene improvised? From
Yes.
when Daniela asked if there were any more dips?
Yes, it was all improvised, yeah.
Yeah. That's the first AD. It's just there, running up the stairs, looking like Jason Statham.
Again, this is the next section between Michael and his dad, and his dad being dismissive of his work. I mean, I remember me having a similar thing with my dad, where I desperately wanted to kind of impress him with my work, and him being hard on me, not because he didn't love me, but because he wanted to push me. And I think it's something that a lot of father, son, mother, daughter, parent, children relationships can relate to. This feeling of, I want you to accept me as an artist or whatever it is, and the parent pushing and pushing and pushing. And it can, for me, it was quite hard at times. And I think Seb plays it so wonderfully, actually.
Because we don't really have a lot, like, it's tricky because you work very hard and you don't have a lot to show a lot of the time for what you've done. And it can be difficult, those conversations with your parents, where you're like, well, yeah, we're just grinding away. No one's really paying attention.
And you know what, actually, someone just mentioned the moment where Tim kind of comes to Michael and tells him about his dad. I think of all the relationships here that are going on, I think Tim and Michael are probably the closest. And our idea was always that they had kind of grown up together.
Yeah, and they were best friends.
Exactly, yeah. And so there are other scenes that we'll come to that were actually unfortunately cut out between Tim and Michael, which kind of enhanced their friendship a little bit more. This walk and talk coming up was a very, very ambitious and difficult thing to shoot, mainly because of the lack of light and the camera that we were using. I mean, we shot the film on a Red, which has incredible kind of latitude for in particular night sequences, but it was the Red 1, so it was a very early Red, and the streets that we shot on, unfortunately, when the street lights are over you, it's great, but when it's not, it really does descend into darkness. So I can only praise, I genuinely can't praise the grading team enough for bringing this footage to life.
Deluxe and Technicolor just did an amazing job.
And this was all done,
like, to be able to shoot this, because the camera is actually hanging out the boot of a car.
We were tucked in the boot of a car, and the first AD was driving it incredibly slowly, and I was just saying to him,
he wasn't even driving it, he was pushing it.
Yeah.
So we had, the car was in neutral and it was being pushed along.
That's budget filmmaking right there. And you can see how long this take goes on for.
And here we've got another guy who's got a starring role in our film, walking around in the background. on the phone.
Yeah. I really wanted us to sustain a moment between Michael and Kristen here. That's why it's all kind of done in one shot, not because of some sort of need to show how, you know, technically proficient we might be. I wanted just to hold on them and just watch Michael try to charm her and her battle him against that, and you start to understand how these two people could have been a couple and could possibly be a couple again. And I just loved watching these two together. So I mean, it was a privilege. This perfume that she talks about, exclamation, was actually a perfume that I remember from when I was younger, and my girlfriend at the time was wearing it. This is one of those things that we mentioned earlier, where we had quite an expanded part for Kristen's mum, and in particular her relationship with Bobby. But unfortunately, when the whole film came together, I mean, the first cut of the film was 2.5 hours long, so that should tell you how much extra footage we have. But that's
this here is actually Steph's mother.
That's my mum and my brother, actually.
Who sort of looks like Seb.
Yeah, bizarrely, yeah. This scene actually is a lot longer than you see here. This is probably, I'd say, half of what we shot. And there's a wonderful moment before this bit where Kristen and Michael talk about something that happened when they were younger. But again, when we were editing the film and we were trying to get it to that kind of magical 90 minutes, we felt we just had to cut to the real heart of what the scene was talking about.
Yeah, Seb's so beautifully tender as Michael. It's and this is a camera that me and Steph just absolutely love, the Instax. So it's like a modern Polaroid. It's like quite wide, still quite available, very cheap. The stamp collection in the background is actually the producer's Fola, and there was a scene in an early draft where it was mentioned, but then it didn't make it into it, just because we were cutting for time and space. But we kept the stamp collection because it's a lovely collection.
And this is actually the bedroom that Sam grew up in when he was younger.
Oh yeah.
I can see a lot of tweets coming through about the deleted scenes. I feared that this would happen. We do have a collection of deleted scenes. I promise that Sam and I will get together and talk about which ones we can release. Because the truth is that you cut these scenes, but they are, once you realise that they're not going to be in the film, they only reach a certain level. And they don't they're certainly not graded or mixed, but the editing isn't as fine as it needs to be. But I promise we'll go back and we'll try and find a collection of deleted scenes that we can kind of get out to the people that love the film.
How many takes did it take for the walk? I feel like we actually didn't do it in that many takes because we went on and shot more stuff that night.
It took 7 takes.
Yeah.
7 takes there.
A lot of the time when people say nice things to each other, it tends to be things that people have said to Steph. And when people shout at each other, it tends to be things that they've said to me.
That's absolutely not true.
This exchange is stuff that has been shouted at me. There's a sign on the door there saying dressing room. The guy who did this fall down the stairs was just amazing. Because Seb did one of these himself, but we also had a guy, and all he does is throw himself downstairs, set himself on fire, and he just turned up. He really liked us. He didn't charge us, which was amazing, and threw himself down the stairs 3 times. I love these two. I just love watching them.
It's tricky, isn't it, when you're trying to establish that these two characters had a past together and that there might still be some chemistry left between them now, but they're completely at different places. So Kristen's character has obviously moved on; she's had a child, etc. But Michael's very much where he was back then, still living with his dad. So it's kind of this clash of someone who's moved on and someone who hasn't at all. And Michael really needs to step up to the plate and move on in his life to try and have an adult relationship.
Mm.
I did see a tweet earlier that asked if we'd written these scenes, whether they were based on real life. I can safely say that Sam and I have never had the problems that Marco is having with protein shakes or growth hormone. However, it was a story that I heard from
it was
brother.
a magazine.
It was my brother actually that told me a story about it from a guy in his gym. And I researched it, and then we found a story in a magazine, and then we thought it was really funny, and we had to put it in.
I love every time Marco says testosterone, he says it wrong, and every time Tim makes a face.
That wasn't in the script actually. That's just so that's just the kind of relationship that Tim and Marco have, which is Johnny and Tom. So what happens in between the gallery scene and this scene is that Tim has gone and had an evening with the girl that he was with at the art gallery scene. And what happens was at the beginning of this cafe scene, there's an extended section, again, another deleted scene, apologies, you will see it, between Tim and Daniela's character, where you see that she's actually stolen Tim's she's stolen his kettle because he's famous and she slept with him and she had a great night, and it's kind of a really awkward situation between Tim and Daniela's character. But again, unfortunately, we had to kind of cut that and just get straight to the boys in the cafe
That's
scene.
funny. People noticed that Tim was wearing the same clothing for 24 hours.
Of course.
It's been a stop out.
And this is where we wanted really to have Kristen be part of the gang. This is where she starts to infiltrate the four boys and starts to give a bit of female perspective into their lives. This was a tricky scene to shoot.
Yeah.
So we basically
in the background, you can see Ben and Fola, the producers.
There are producers right there.
Yeah.
We had this cinema literally for a couple of hours because a friend of mine works there. So we had to do all of this in one shot.
In Hampstead.
So, yeah, and I just thought at this point in the film, it's lovely to kind of, let's just get to know where all the characters are, what they're doing. And obviously that more women love Tim, which is exactly what happens in life.
Vicky, who is here being brilliant, actually just turned out to help out on the film and then ended up with a scene. I don't know if this character was in the script or if we just put it into it.
I think we did have a character that Tim kind of that someone who essentially stalks Tim from the show. She recognizes him. But this shot just kind of, like I said before, sums up where all the characters are. So hopefully the audience are up to speed with the dynamics and the relationships that we're trying to set up and pay off in our film. And obviously, we felt like it was time to start bringing Michael and Kristen together as a potential romantic relationship. But obviously, there's still this underlying question of their history and this kind of awkwardness between them.
And here comes the score again.
This kind of motif that Mon
It's
River.
got a really nice title that Mon gave it. Was it The Second Time I Saw You First? That's the love theme between the two of them.
I'll be honest, when we shot this scene in this, this was a pub that the producers had found, which was a wonderful place actually. But we did this shot, and I was so devastated. I just thought, oh my God, it's one of the worst things I've ever shot. And I swear, we came to the edit, and I saw the moment here between Kristen and Michael, and it ended up being one of my favourite moments in the film. It's bizarre when you're there and you're in the heat of it and you're shooting things, and sometimes things can not appear as though they're going as well as they actually are. And when you look at the heart of what's going on in the scene, the connection between these two, I felt was really strong. And I love the way that Michael looks at her, and yeah, it's just it really kind of solidifies how they are starting to fall for each other again. And this song, this kind of idea of the repetitive song that came back, was something that Sam and I had talked about quite a lot.
Katie, who at the moment is on top of Tom, doesn't actually have a tattoo. That's fake. And then this is where Tim's glasses come back. So he's been wearing contact lenses while he's been trying to be Ricky. And then he goes back to being Tim. He looks so cool in this. Like, I guess that must be his robe, because this is actually Seb's flat, isn't it? As a location.
It is,
like,
yeah.
We were just basically burning through everyone we knew. We were trying to get a bit of time.
But again, this is another one of those moments where we're trying to establish that Michael and Tim have a relationship that's just a touch stronger than the others. It runs a little bit longer.
Because I think that's normal within groups, isn't it? People have that dynamic. This was a very hot scene to shoot because the room that they're in is so tidy. Like, I think it was only slightly bigger than the bed. I just remember you guys coming down from it just covered in sweat.
We lost a few pounds up there, yeah.
Yeah, and this is actually the room where we broke Paul's light fitting, because this is back in Kristen's flat. I mean, and like Roshni did such a good job at dressing this room, because like this is a single man's flat, and you completely buy that a kid lives there.
So what happened actually in a very, very late cut of the film, we have this scene that you're watching now, and following it is a scene that Michael and Kristen are playing an adult version of Guess Who. It was a scene that we loved, we desperately wanted to keep, but
it was really important in the script. But
yeah, and it's a lovely moment between Michael and Kristen in that Guess Who scene, but ultimately we just felt that it was quite similar to this scene, and that it was really just repeating information. So unfortunately we had to make the decision and cut the Guess Who scene. But that is a blooper, that is a deleted scene that I'm sure we can share, because it's got some wonderful moments in it, and it's actually really funny. Anyway, we think it's funny.
And this camera is your camera that Michael's using here, isn't it?
Yeah, I was always dubious about having Michael take pictures of Kristen and the child, but considering Kristen is a friend that he grew up with, ultimately I think he just about gets away with it. but it was something that I know we spoke about at the time.
And then here we are at the burial. And this was such a fun day to shoot.
This was a wonderful day to shoot, and we were very lucky with the weather. Again, we
were
weren't
just blessed.
paying
because
to
this
be
was
there.
September.
The thing that was tricky with this scene was that we had quite a lot to shoot, and we were racing against the tide. So we didn't have as much time as we needed, to be honest. But thankfully, we managed to get a scene out.
Yeah. The wellies that Tom's wearing here are mine, and because I'd chosen to wear bags like during the scene.
Actually, what I do love actually about this scene is the costumes, because you can tell each character by what's on their feet, and in particular what they're wearing. So Sam with the carrier bag, Marco with his shoes, and the boots, and the color of the boots for Kristen, and obviously Tom as well. It's just this wonderful color palette that's going on here that I think JC really brought out. Quite an ambitious idea to have a cat explode on the River Thames in a no-budget romantic comedy film, but we were determined to do it. So yeah, thankfully we managed to pull it off just about.
Yeah, because the Jennifer Sheridan, who was working on the film as like an assistant editor and the DIT on the day, lives in a boat that's just around here, which is how we were able to almost do this. Otherwise, it would have been such a tricky thing.
We just saw a tweet about someone asking whether we drew any attention. I don't, you know what? I don't really remember us drawing any attention. I think there was some concern that there was a police boat at some point, but nobody came and spoke to us. And the truth is, we were such a small crew that we weren't causing anyone any harm or any trouble. But
I think there was like on a day like this where we've got the 4 guys and Kristen, the crew was almost the same on the other side. Like there was only probably about 4 or 6 people. And then here you can see CG. So there isn't like the box isn't on fire. It's actually like just that's all computer graphics. Tom came up with this song.
Yeah, this is an improvised moment from Tom. Another brilliant bit that I had to just keep in. And he doesn't tell me. He didn't tell me before that he was going to do it. He just did it, and I just had to keep it because it was so great.
Shot, you can see how close the tide is. So as soon as the camera stops, you had to run down and basically almost carry Sapphire out in weight.
I did, yeah. I did.
And this is a bit weird because where they were on the Thames, if you look left, you wouldn't see Big Ben. And in the distance, you can see the smoke coming off the cat.
The cat box.
Seb actually found this pub, didn't he? The Cat's Back.
And it's actually called The Cat's Back. That's not that's actually there. And this scene in the toilet here, I think, is probably my favourite in the film, only because I think it really sums up the tone of what we're doing. Like it's funny, but it's also romantic, and it's also dramatic. It's kind of everything in one, and that's the kind of, I mean, there's the work that Sam and I try to do. We try and make things that are a combination of tones, and I really think it comes across in this scene. Not only that, I think JC lit and shot this scene so beautifully. I just I love the colours in it, and I think it's wonderfully played by these two.
It just looks so beautiful, like this, the way the two of them look, like the darkness, the light. A lot of the stills we used from the film are from this scene.
I remember rehearsing this scene quite a bit, and it started in quite a different place and kind of developed into what what you see here. And ultimately, I think it was a lot longer, and we just cut it and cut it and cut it. The girl who you saw, who's in the toilet, Mandy, is is a wonderful girl. She's a friend of my girlfriend at the time, and she was gracious enough to come and do it. And she was so funny. We had to keep her.
In this scene, Kristen is holding her trousers, which means she's standing in a pub trouserless, which fortunately everyone's too emotionally connected to notice. We went through quite a few ringtones to get.
But this is what we were talking. This is what I'm talking about in terms of the tone.
Yeah.
We reached this point in the scene, and then we kind of add this additional bit here.
She's so good.
Yeah, Mandy is brilliant here.
Oh, we didn't actually. Oh, someone just asked if we had to wade in to retrieve the cat, but the cat didn't actually. It was never really on the Thames. That was all done in post. That was all CG.
We did have a paw. A paw was made for us.
Yeah, and that was a teddy bear that had lost its arm.
Movie magic, everyone. Movie magic.
Movie magic.
I always had this idea of.
I love how Kristen just pulled out. Like, if I just brought all this emotion to that moment, you just see so much in her face.
And her decision to go back to Peter, again, what we talked about before, this viable option.
Yeah, I like how you almost don't know which door she's knocking on.
And again, I think Sargon here plays it so straight. You completely believe that he is a good option for Kristen, and probably even a stronger option than Michael, especially since he's the father of her child. And that was something that's
living with his dad.
I always saw this father-son sequence as a journey through the house. So they start upstairs in Michael's room, which is in the loft essentially, and then they come down a level, and then their relationship kind of progresses a little bit more, and then they come down a level again into the garden, and it's really them just trying to as they go level by level, kind of the layers of the onion peel back, and they can get to the heart of who they are and what they mean to each other. This scene was actually a lot longer in the cut, and Michael's dad references Michael's mother in a very beautiful way, but we ended up cutting the Michael's mother reference because we just felt that we wanted to just focus on the relationship between Michael and his father, and we thought that was strong enough to pull us through.
I love how much stuff the production team found to fill Michael's room. The idea of it, like, because there's all these magazines, there's all his photos, there's all his cameras. It's like his life is just like this mess, and it's too big for the space it's in. And
this moment was something that was originally based on that scene in Rocky, where Rocky and Mickey are having that conversation, and Rocky's in the toilet, and he comes out because he thinks that Mickey's left, but he hasn't, and then it goes down the stairs, and that was always an inspiration for this scene. I always wanted them to have a conversation without looking at each other and kind of following each other through the house. Kind of they need to kind of get how they feel off their chests, and I think if they're looking at each other, they won't be able to do it. And we always had an idea of Michael. We had a scene originally where Michael would just sit and have dinner in silence with his dad. So when he sees his dad, he can't really speak to him. The only way he can speak to him is if he can't see him. So if he's locked away in a room.
Hmm. Because that's probably one of the screenplays we probably keep coming back to. Rocky.
Yeah, it's a
Rocky
wonderful film.
and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. I think
Yeah.
they're the two. They're probably the two films that we constantly talk about.
And this idea that Michael has lost his mother and his dad has obviously lost his wife. We don't really hit too much about Michael's mother, other than she perhaps wasn't as wonderful as you'd expect her to be. And again, that was another symbol of relationships not being perfect, but it being okay. People have to work through imperfections in their relationships, and it's almost not that it's a good thing that anyone dies, but it means that these two can finally come closer, because you imagine that she's probably the linchpin in their family, and these two have to find a way to survive without her. And that was something that was always very special. And this gesture that Michael's dad does with the photo,
And his shoe.
and his shoe, which I love. I love that he only has one shoe.
And it's nice that Michael finally talks about what's been upsetting him.
I love Seb here. I think he's just.
Yeah.
I remember talking to him about this being a key moment, and he just wanted just to be given a bit of breathing space to think about it. And when I watched it, I went after this take. Actually, I went and I hugged him, because I just I really felt as if he got to the core of who Michael was, and what his what his pain was all about and where it stemmed from.
Because we had when we were writing it, there was like a subplot that Michael's dad was actually quite a famous photographer. But that was something that just ended up falling by the wayside. It was like
I think it's something that Andrew used actually to kind of ground his character, to give him some sort of history.
Yeah, because I guess we did talk about it with him.
And that's the other thing about this sequence. Actually, it's give and take always. Michael's dad makes the initial effort. Michael comes back, then he makes the effort, and back and forth they go until Michael makes the final kind of run outside, and then it's his dad that hugs his son. And you can. I never wanted to hear anything that was being said here. We always wanted it from distance, because I just felt that the shoe being given back and the hug, I always thought it was a lovely moment, and hopefully it resonates with people who watch it.
Because I think the thing I like about it is that it doesn't like when you have these big arguments with family, it's almost like you just have to say how you feel. It's not that someone's right or someone's wrong, but that you've said how you felt and they've said how they felt, and then you move on.
These shots here with the winter, this was something JC and I just went out and shot. It was snowing outside. I literally just called him and said, look, I want to try and get some B-roll for winter, for Dead Cat, so let's just go and take a drive. So I basically just drove around with JC in my car, and we just picked up a handful of winter shots that we could kind of use, because it was important that we showed the timeline in the film and us moving towards winter. Time has passed now.
I think Sargon just turned up with these reindeer horns. I can't
It was not. This is. I mean, the reindeer horns make him slightly buffoonish, but this scene is very important because it really states how passionate Peter is about his family, which again is such a strong character trait, and it's such a wonderful thing to see him.
Mm.
And what is also lovely is that Michael understands the gift, actually, that the book that Michael has written was something that we came up with fairly early, actually, in the script. We knew that he had to make a gesture for Kristen to listen to him, and when you really think about it, the gesture that Michael makes is a bad one. He essentially uses her child in order to
Manipulate her.
Yeah, he does. It is manipulative, but despite that, it comes from such a good place, and
and I've got a special guest.
It's all from the heart. Nice, Sam. Nice. This was such an important moment, and this shot. So all the shots over the shoulder were done afterwards. I focused on this shot where we're just watching Sophia or Kristen, and it was the first time that Sophia had ever seen this book, and I kind of told her, she obviously knew what to expect, but it was the first time that she'd seen it, and she did all of this just in one take, and I just let the camera run, and she absolutely broke my heart. I promise. I was behind the camera, and I got really upset watching it because I just completely bought into it. She just, for me, she was just absolutely magical, and I love this take. We did one, and I kept it.
Also, the picture that Seb took at the beginning, so in the first shot
of the cat,
of the cat. That's where the picture ends up. Oh, and Yolanda, who was also in the laundrette, she was one of the makeup ladies. Because everyone who worked on the film is also in the film at some point.
So something that we haven't mentioned really is Michael's photography. In the original, in the longer cut of the film, Michael's photography played a much stronger part than it does now. You only see a hint of it. Oh, here's Sophia here, just breaking my heart.
It's so beautiful. Like, it's such a...
It's horrible to have filmmakers compliment themselves as they're watching a feature film. I promise.
Well, to be fair,
this is nothing to do with us. This is complimenting.
This is what they did, and they really just like
the value
took
of great
it so seriously, and yeah.
But sorry, going back to my original point, Michael's photography played a much bigger part. We saw a lot of the history between Michael and Kristen through Michael's photography that he did at the time when they knew each other 10 years ago. And you'll see it in this cafe scene coming up. There's more photographs that Michael has taken of Kristen. Unfortunately, we just had to let it go.
Yeah. So the idea was that at this point he was doing a new exhibition, and it was of these portraits that he'd taken on Kristen when they were younger.
I have a little tidbit here. So Johnny there, when he downed the eggs, he couldn't actually down the eggs because they were so horrible. And on one of the takes, he vomited the egg up onto Tom's suit that you saw there, which resulted in Tom and Johnny not talking for 10 minutes because they were angry at each other. Thankfully, they love each other and everything was resolved. But it was a very funny 10 minutes for everybody else. That is all real chest hair from Sam.
Yeah, I'd actually trimmed it for the shot.
That's disgusting.
Yeah.
And there's a line here, actually, the line about the kind of key line in the scene where Tim is talking to Michael was completely Tom. The section about it being ridiculous that they're not together. I mean, that was. I wish that we could take credit for that. We cannot. That is completely Tom Meissen, and that's what I meant when I said earlier. He comes so prepared with, like, he's thought about it so so intelligently. He'd probably tell you that he just said it off the cuff, but it was such a wonderful line, and it really got
It was
kind
really
of
good.
really cut to exactly what the scene needed to say, and he said it far more articulately than we wrote. So
And exactly what was needed for the film. It
yeah,
was almost like he just brought out something that was missing.
yeah,
Um,
and it's lovely when you work with people like Seb and Tom and Johnny, and because together they just bring so much to the stuff that you're writing, that you feel like a kid in a candy store. You're filming everything and you're just like, how am I going to fit all of this into the scene, because there's so much
yeah,
great stuff.
because I think there was a scene like when Tom did the sonnet,
Mm.
and that was like we had a scene when Tim came by to like jivvy up Michael and get him out of the house before he had the confrontation with his dad. And Tom came round and sort of read this sonnet, and it was amazing and it was great. But it was like, unfortunately, one of the things that we had to lose.
Deleted scene. We'll put it in the deleted scenes, I promise.
Oh, someone said thank you for a shirtless Tom Myson.
Yeah. We had to put Tom next to Sam.
Yeah. And this is the bit that Tom improvised, basically.
And unfortunately, it's the best bit of writing in the whole scene. I always think this is a lovely moment. This is a great example of the relationship that Seb and Johnny have together.
Mm.
It's wonderful because Johnny's known a lot for doing kind of hardcore gangster kind of movies, and he's such a wonderful comic talent that it really. I'm so glad that we were able to show that side of his talents in this film. This scene is a pure example of the talents of our editor Steve Beard. He cut this scene so wonderfully, and he does he holds on Maisie, the little girl, just at the right time, where you just think, where he just gives you enough inclination where you think the relationship between these two people is going to crush this poor little girl. And it's so lovely. He cuts to her here.
Yeah.
And it's so lovely when you have a child watching the destruction of a relationship in front of you. And I think Steve really because that wasn't originally in the scene, but Steve cut it together so beautifully.
Yeah. And I think it starts to sort of show that maybe
the unraveling here between these two characters. And I think Sophia plays it so lovely here, where there's a hint of regret about her decision. And
because we had a whole sequence of scenes of them getting to the party that they're at.
Yeah.
And almost after that scene, we were like, well, we don't need them. It all happened in that.
Yeah. This is also nice. I love that Johnny or Marco knows Michael's dad. It kind of just reinforces the history that exists between this group of friends. They know each other's parents, you know.
And now that the air's cleared, they're happier again. And
this was an interesting scene. This wonderful actor Andrew McBean came and again, it was kind of a joke on what I mentioned before about relationships not having to be this kind of ideal, perfect for them to work in some way or for you to get something from them. And yeah, I mean, his line where he has to go back to his family is kind of horrible and heartbreaking, but Sam and I found it very funny. And yeah, actually, kind of, we thought it made the scene just take it up a level to the conventional.
And we sort of thought it was important that this had a New Year's scene, because New Year's a great time for people saying how they feel about each other. And Michael is next to Steph's parents.
That's my dad there, yeah, and my mum. my stepmom, I should say, because obviously a picture of my mum was earlier on. So
And
wonderful production design here.
Mm.
Obviously, we're a no-budget film, so everybody that was there on a favour. And what the girls did, they basically found these wonderful candelabras, which, if anyone's making a no-budget film, they really do give a sense of scale, I guess, to a scene like this. And we were lucky to make it feel like it was a real wedding. This wedding sequence actually was again a lot longer. There was a big elaborate sequence with Marco and keys in a bowl from all of his ex-partners. I mean, it was a very long wedding scene.
Yeah.
But we cut it down just to Michael's speech, just to kind of get to the point as quick as we could. We had this idea that we had to meet this magical kind of 90-minute mark. So anything that was superfluous to our key story, unfortunately, had to
We just got rid of.
had to go.
Seb's brother is one of the guests here. The whole crew, when they turned up, were asked to come wearing wedding gear, and when they're not being used, they're extras at the wedding. Because JC made a point of everyone wearing a shirt and tie, didn't they? Oh, and there's
Yeah.
Ash.
Yeah.
So Ash was our star assistant.
Can I just have a little shout out as well to Victoria here, who plays Marco's wife, Emma. She is an absolute star talent, and
Yeah.
she doesn't, again, unfortunately, there's so many great actors in this film that are underused, and she's one of them. But the part that she did play, she did it so well. That's
There's my bum.
unfortunately Sam's bum. And yes, you're all welcome for Tom in in female underwear.
And that is Jennifer Sheridan. So she was one of the editors. And here they are at a dull party. So we thought it would be nice to cut between them having a great time and then an awkward New Year's Eve party. And Sargon's so awkward.
It's, the awkwardness of these two is actually so enjoyable to be part of, actually. And this is classic Tom Meissen here. So there's not very many people that could deliver this line with this kind of wonderful looking girl, and then just be so kind of heartbreakingly charming.
Because this is something that your friend Joe did, isn't it?
Yeah, so a very good friend of mine, Joe Kloska, had told me about this line that he tried on this girl, and I thought, oh God, you know what we need? I really want Tim to go out on a high. I want him to find someone, because he's so lost during the film and he's so confused. And when this line came up, I thought, oh, if I just give this to Tom, I know that he'll absolutely nail it. And when you see him doing it, you just fall in love with him, and I think that's the power of him as an actor. You really want him to be with someone, and he's just, I mean, he's disgustingly handsome, isn't he?
Yeah. I think he actually bought his own party poppers. And Liz is playing the bridesmaid, who is actually mentioned earlier in the film. So she's mentioned during the cinema scene, where Marco says you can't have her as your bridesmaid. She's a slag. And then this is where we see her.
This was quite an interesting little thing that we decided to put in. I think in a conventional romantic comedy, you probably wouldn't have this moment where the groom, or this kind of lovable character, Marco in this case, who everybody enjoys listening to, you know, he's got this kind of wonderful motor mouth, but he's effectively a cheat. And he's obviously still got a connection with this girl who is his wife's bridesmaid at his wedding, and we wanted to kind of tell it from her point of view, really, and have this moment where you understood that Marco wasn't just this wonderful character. He was also someone who, you know, had problems with other women, and that's something that probably won't end when this film ends either. Again, not a perfect relationship, people working through things, something that was very important for us to keep reiterating. And I think Liz actually plays it so. I love watching her in this scene, and I love watching her reaction to Marco, and it just gives the film an added kind of layer of something different. There's something more going on here than we would usually expect to hear. And I remember Sam and I writing this scene in my garden at home, and I always thought that it was an important moment for the film, or you know, us to show the tone of what we wanted our film to be.
And we thought it was nice that Michael makes a connection with her, not a romantic connection, but they have a moment. That's my parents sitting down just there. But unlike in Speed Dating, where someone reached out to him, oh, and there's the look.
It's giving her a story, and I think even the characters that have small parts should have something about them that makes them interesting or slightly three-dimensional.
But like, unlike the Speed Dating scene, Michael has sort of walked away from a romantic situation, but he still made a connection, unlike when we saw him at the beginning of the film.
We loved playing with these lines here, and this woman who has essentially accepted that she married for money. In a romantic comedy, it's lovely to have the antithesis of the heart of what you're trying to say. So, and she delivers the line so wonderfully. It was quite a fun little scene to put in our film. And ultimately, it's that antithesis that forces Kristen to pursue Michael on this moment,
or even just the memory of him at this point, like the last place she was with him.
Actually, that's a really good point, Sam. Can you talk just a little bit about that? Because it wasn't the fact that we wanted Michael and Kristen to meet at the very end of Dead Cat.
Because they don't know at this point that they're running to the same place. They're just running to the last place they were with each other. I think it's when Michael says the closest I'm going to get to is a memory. He's saying, I'm going to go to where I last had like this sort of peace or happiness. Me and Steph have had to watch the film a lot, and this at festivals and at screenings, and sometimes I won't watch the whole thing, but I'll always watch it from this point onwards. Just because I love what Cal, the guy who, Mon River, the guy who did the music, the way he put it together. I love Seb's running.
Every romantic comedy's got to have a running sequence.
Yeah, I know, exactly. You're meant to run to the airport. Here we all run to the pub.
Actually, it's good that we should mention Mon River here, because we spoke quite a lot about this end sequence, and you know, I wanted it to feel like you know, kind of a symphony playing as we go. As we move through the gears, and there's the possibility that they're together and then they're not together, and Mon River basically, I mean, he worked so hard, so many layers to this kind of end sequence, and it's so beautiful. And I couldn't have been happier with it, to be honest. He kind of came back, and I thought, this is just perfect for our film. Yeah, I mean, I will endlessly be grateful for him.
Awards saying that.
These fireworks shots were actually taken on New Year's Eve in London, and it was one of the coldest nights of my life. And I went down there with JC, and we shot this bunch of fireworks shots. I always loved this moment. This kind of moment.
It's funny because we sort of disagreed, like, because
we did, definitely.
I was never that sure about it. I was like, is it a phantom hand?
But I liked
But
the idea always that she desperately wanted him to be there, and
yeah,
he's not there, and then we see now that she breaks down because she realizes he's who she wants at this moment, and I love that it's the only one bit of fantasy or a fantastical moment in the film.
and and they're only a few feet away. But I just like that him getting this sort of relish from this moment.
Again, there's probably only about 10 people in that pub, but
Yeah,
I
they're
think
just very close together.
yeah.
And I think it's this like sort of, what is it? It's like a petrol pump that
Yeah.
Seb leans against here, which you'd have seen earlier when Kristen walked past it, which starts to put the geography of how close they actually are.
And then we're building towards our finale here, and it was always tricky, this last scene, how far we went with it, whether we alluded to them being together forever, or whether they just met, or whether they met at all. But we always felt it important that Kristen referenced the fact that he shouldn't have talked about her daughter Tabitha in the book, but she just can't help but love him. I mean, they've got history, they've got chemistry, they're meant to be together, but it was always important for us to not specify how their lives will continue after this moment, just that they needed to be with each other right now.
That they're both having an emotional connection, like not one that's based on necessity or reality, almost just like they're both admitting what they want and what they need.
And I particularly like how Kristen grabs Michael for the kiss. She forces him essentially to grow up, to be part of this moment, because Michael is reluctant at points to make that leap into being an adult. And obviously Sam and I were speaking about this not long ago, that the first shot of our film is a dead cat, Michael unable to take responsibility for his life, and so the very last shot had to be a live cat, the symbol of a possible future between these two guys. And there you have it. That is our movie. That is Dead Cat. And all of these people that are coming up in this cast list, we will be forever indebted to, and that is not exaggeration at all. They gave so much of their time and talent for our dream, really, and they're all wonderful.
I mean, it's like I think people got involved with the film because they believed in it, and the team around it. But yeah, I mean, I think the cat thing was interesting because we wanted, like, at a beginning of a romantic comedy, you tend to meet them and they're both, the two protagonists are dead, so they're unable to love, and by the end, you hope that they're in a position where they can love again. And that's, well, because cats have 9 lives, and this cat has come back. Because I know when we both wrote it, we were both in quite dark places, because we were sort of, which is actually a line from the film, it excuses wanky behaviour. But that we were both in places where we weren't very happy, and we felt a bit like dead cats. And the idea was almost like, as a part of making the film, was finding a way, you know, to be live cats again, I guess.
Yeah, and I think it's, you know, listen, it's a love story, and it was definitely, you know, when you meet that person that got away, always is that person that you think is the perfect person for you, and you have to fight for those people, and you have to make compromises in your life to get the person that you think is the special person in your life. And yeah, and our film is just a love story. You know, we wanted people to feel that.
So we've had a couple of questions, which we'll just quickly go through. So do you have any plans for a sequel? We probably wouldn't have a direct sequel to Dead Cat. It'd be nice to make a film together as a team, but that would be it'd be very difficult to make a film in the way that we did Dead Cat. It would, yeah. We're trying to get a lot of the bloopers and stuff like that together, and as soon as we do, we'll have it up online. A lot of people have asked about the music, and the music was a really interesting thing because we had a really Ben, who produced the film, had a very close relationship with one of the A&R guys at Sony, Sam Mumford, who came on to bring the tracks together. And he was just able to put together a series of songs and introduce us to Mourne River, which I think just worked really well. It's like a little bit of dynamite in the film that really helped it have life.
Absolutely.
Love this song. Had to look. Okay, and it's "Dry the River" is the final song.
So they're an incredible band.
Yeah.
And when we found that song, it was such a great moment because it was obviously the song that we knew we wanted to be a theme and something that could represent the nostalgia in their relationship and also represent who they were, and who they were as potential lovers. And we absolutely love the song. And again, Dry the River are a band that I'm a big fan of. So thank you so much to them.
And we had just this question, which I liked. Whose were the dead cats in the credits? So at the end, we put "in memory of our dead cats" as the last credit. And basically, we while we were making the film, people's cats died, and we'd always, and people would send us a picture of a dead cat. So we did a sort of thank you to those dead cats of the cast and crew who died.
It's weird. Dead Cat was never going to be the actual title of the film. It was always a working title. But as we went through the making of the film, we just couldn't think of a better one. And admittedly, Dead Cat doesn't scream romantic comedy. And it's
terrifying to put into Google. Like the number of times we're searching for, we're seeing how we're doing on Google and stuff like that, and I have to look through some really horrible images to get to some of the stuff that people are saying about the film.
But we thought it gave the film an independent kind of quirky look at relationships, which is ultimately what our film's about. So we decided to stick with it, despite Marco. Johnny playing Marco, literally he must have texted me close to 30 different titles for the film, which
mainly revolving around him. And also there's the thank you to Darcelicious, which was in the credits, and that was obviously really important because the Darcelicious team got behind Dead Cat really early on.
They did.
There was a day where we had the only thing we ate was a basket of fruit that was sent to us by Liz and Darcelicious. And obviously, your support of the film has meant the world to us.
It really has. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of those people as well, because obviously you love Tom as much as we do, which is wonderful. But that doesn't mean that you have to show support for every bit of his work, and the fact that you've shown so much gracious support for Dead Cat and trying to get it out there and showing it to people means so much, because I mean it is a passion project for us, and anyone that can spread the word on it and share it with people is I mean I will be forever grateful for that. So thank you so much.
Thanks so much for inviting us to do this. It's
been fun.
It's been fun. It's funny, this is the first time I've watched the film all the way through like this as an audience member for ages. Oh, yeah, no, someone's just quoted something Tom said about it being romantic and a comedy, but not a romantic comedy.
Again, another piece of Tom Meissen gold.
Yeah.
He's absolutely right.
He's a wise man. Well, thank you so much. We won't keep you up any later. And yeah,
absolute
take care,
pleasure, everyone. Take care.
See you
Thank you
later.
so much.
Bye.